Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. The Idaho 4 case, we finally got some information that has been sort of kept a secret for over 2 years, and that was the 911 call and the recording from it. And if we all remember this case, there was a gag order issued by Judge John Judge, who was the original judge in Idaho. And I think there was even a judge before him, a female judge, that initially issued the gag order. So nothing was coming out. And the 911 call, of course, was one of those things that was held secret, even though many people wanted it released. So now it is released. And who didn't want it released? Well, obviously, the defense, not only did they not want it released, they want it suppressed. They do not want it as evidence. And I think, if anything, this 911 call, and we're going to listen to it later on, this 911 call absolutely, in my view, helps the prosecution and hurts the defense. Why would the defense insist they want it suppressed if it helped them? They wouldn't. It's obviously helping the prosecution and hurting the defense. So we'll analyze why that is and why the defense doesn't want this in as evidence. And it's a distressing call. It's upsetting. Very upsetting. But the two surviving roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, they saw some things. They saw some things. They heard some things. And then we'll talk about their behavior afterwards. Anyway, folks, hold on to your hats. Hold on to your loved ones. Hold on to your cup of coffee, your glass of wine. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone. There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for betting on all the madness. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from college basketball to a $200,000 bracket contest, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every Cinderella story to every hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Mando, full body deodorant. The thing I like most about Mando body deodorant is that it lasts all day and leaves me feeling clean and fresh. It doesn't quit even under the harshest heat and humidity. The fresh feeling keeps me dry and confident. No need to worry about unsightly sweat stains. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. As a special offer for listeners, new customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% of your starter pack. Use code POLICE in capital letters, POLICE at shopmando.com. That's shopmando.com. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Smell fresher, stay drier, and boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando. Joining me tonight is retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, attorney. Welcome to the show, Professor Mike Geary. Welcome, Mike.
Bill, good evening. Good to see you. Thank you for having me on.
You know, Mike, is this anything that you would have expected? I mean, the gag order was out there. It's been over 2 years. Did you ever expect that they were going to release the 911 call that, of course, resulted in the deaths? Well, not the 911 call, but the call was about the deaths of these 4 students: Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Zana Knodel, and Ethan Chapin. But the 911 call sort of tells us a lot, Mike.
Yeah, Bill, we've talked about this, you, me, and Phil, and many other people we've had on, Matt Murphy from the DA's office in Orange County, California. We talked about how much evidence there is. And the thing is, a lot of people didn't know how much evidence there is actually against Kohlberger. And that vacuum of information leads a lot of people to think there's some sort of conspiracy against the guy. But when you hear this videotape and all the stuff has been, you can't talk about it because of the gag order. So not a lot of people knew about all that they had. Here we now have the drips and drabs coming to the surface before the trial starts. And we see something really important. We hear something really important. This is the spontaneous outburst, the call to 911 that triggered the police response, the law enforcement response, and is by the surviving roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Frank, and then I think there might have been one of Ethan Chapin's fraternity brothers there at the house. But this starts the ball rolling. We're thankful for it because now it gives the public an idea of how everything started with the girls in the morning and the police coming. So it's really excellent. It's very valuable. And it really is a boon for people who were wondering really how much evidence there was. Oh, I haven't heard about this. Nobody's been speaking about it. Now, as it comes to the surface, I think people will have a lot more confidence in the prosecution's case.
Mike, I had mentioned the whole time we've covered this case that I believe the prosecution has a lot more evidence than they're revealing. And people will say, well, how could they do that? Because of discovery. Hey, they can start releasing things right up until the day they go to trial.
Right.
I mean, you would expect most of the discovery material to have been released, but there's going to be some surprises like this. And as I said, and I believe you agreed with, this is a boon to the prosecution and a detriment to the defense, Mike.
Yeah, Bill, these calls, 911 calls, they're always admissible as evidence in a criminal trial. They can help incriminate a suspect. Occasionally they can help, extricate a suspect from a case, depending on what is actually in the 911 call. And it's an excellent little piece of evidence here because you've got a bunch of people that calling 911. You have the timestamp. You know when they first made the contact with law enforcement, and they're saying things spontaneously. It's coming right out of their mouths. It's not rehearsed. You can tell they're distraught, and it's really excellent for letting people know just what was going on when that 911 call was made, what they were thinking, and how they reacted to the slaying of their friends, and how shocking it was, and how devastating it was, and how difficult it was for them to even come to grips with what they saw in front of them. It was a very surrealistic situation to them. They had no preparation for this, and here we have them finally reaching out. It's excellent, and at 99% of the time, it's going to help the prosecution.
Mike, I'm going to play this. This is from ABC News. I think they did a very good job in presenting this. So let's play this.
911 location of your emergency. Something is happening.
Chilling new audio obtained by ABC News of a surviving roommate calling 911 nearly 8 hours after 4 students were stabbed to death in this home near the University of Idaho.
Something happened in our house. We don't know what. What is the address of the emergency? 1122.
One of 2 surviving roommates is on the line, standing in the driveway, terrified and sobbing as she passes the phone to a neighbor who just arrived.
One of the roommates has passed out, and she was drunk last night and she's not waking up. Okay. Oh, and they saw some man in their house last night.
The roommate is then heard again pleading with the dispatcher.
Can I just tell you what happened pretty much? What is going on currently? Is someone passed out right now? I don't really know, but pretty much at 4 a.m. Okay, I need to know what's going on right now if someone is passed out. Can you find that out? Yeah, I'll come. Come on, we gotta go check. But we have to.
You can hear the young woman coaxing her roommate back into that house, and they make their way inside.
Is he passed out? What's wrong? She's not waking up.
You can hear the anguish. For the last 2 years, the murder of Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin have gripped the nation. And the lawyers for the alleged killer, Brian Kohberger, say he is innocent. The former PhD student was arrested weeks after the murders.
The defense has tried to cast doubt on one of the surviving roommates' credibility.
Today, the family of victim Kaylee Goncalves defending the survivors in a statement saying that every breath, every cry, every tremor in the voice reveals a reality so cruel, so brutally honest, it cuts deeper than anything fiction could devise. Please do not waste your energy pointing fingers at those who could not have prevented it. Over the last few weeks, more evidence has been released, helping paint a picture of what happened that November night in 2022.
We're getting a different glimpse at evidence like DNA on their fingernails, text messages and phone calls, timelines that we never heard or saw before. The dots are beginning to connect.
Transcripts showing time-stamped text messages between the two survivors after one told authorities she saw a man clad in black in the home the night of the murders. The filing reveals she tried unsuccessfully to reach the victims. Between 4:22 and 4:24 a.m., the surviving roommates text each other. I'm freaking out right now. No, it's like a ski mask almost. The survivor on the first floor texting back, run down here. It's unclear what happened next, but about 6 hours later, one of the survivors tries again but can't reach the victim's phone by text. Texting Kaylee, please answer. Texting Madison, are you up? And just before noon, more than 7 hours after the murders, that 911 call is made.
In creating those kind of points of when communications occurred and when a time of death had occurred, prosecutors are able to drive home the fact that there was an opportunity and a time that these murders could have occurred and directly point at Brian Kohberger as being the individual based on his location, based on his cell phone when he traveled from one location to another, and that period when no one could track him.
Brian Kohberger's attorneys don't want the exchanges admitted during trial.
So explain, Mike, it's pretty hard to explain, except perhaps shock, drunkenness, fear. Explain the actions of Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk. Can you explain it? Many people aren't buying it, you know. They don't have to buy it. The only people that have to buy it is the jury. But there's Steve Goncalves, the dad of Kaylee Goncalves, forgiving them and understanding them, understanding their fear, understanding their shock, and not holding it against them. Yet, many people in the general public really have it out for these two young girls. That how did they wait out 8 hours to call? I have a problem with it in a way. I don't fully understand it, but I do understand shock. And I do understand being intoxicated, and I do understand fear. And that's the only explanation I can come up with, Mike.
Yeah, Bill, you know, you get a lot of people that hate on these two girls, and they look at the time frame and they're like, oh, they didn't call for 8 hours because they were getting rid of all the drugs and the cocaine in the house and all kinds of wild stuff. And this is what happens when you have this dearth of information for 2 years. This is our first hearing of what they were going through when they woke up and got out of bed and they went upstairs from that first floor to the second floor and they found Zaina, and they're like, they couldn't believe that she was dead. They probably on some level knew she was dead and wasn't just passed out. They had a hard time dealing with what they're looking at. They're young children. We're law enforcement. We've run into hundreds and hundreds of dead people in various states in our career. And older people who've had more experience in life and death, you know, they view the world differently. These are young kids, and this is their first blush with terror. I dare anybody other than a law enforcement officer, I dare anybody to wake up in your home and have your family slaughtered around you, and then sit there and say, you know, how did you deal with it? You know, they dealt with it the best they can when they saw what happened. They were asleep. They were tired. It's 4 a.m. They were there. There was a little bit of terror at around 4 a.m. They didn't know exactly what it meant. They saw that person walk through the house. Dylan saw that person walk through the house and leave. He creeped her out. And then she texted Bethany and said, "I'm really scared." And Bethany said, "Run to our house, run to our downstairs to our room, and we'll stay together." She knew something was up. They had no idea. They couldn't face it. When the sun came up, they faced it, and they saw what the horror was. I don't have a problem with it. I think I understand, but I dare anybody to go through anything like that sort of terror, seeing your family slaughtered, and then sit there and then criticize somebody for their lack of actions. I don't see it. I think it's sad that people have been so harsh. You know, we can say, okay, you know, would have been better, sure, if they'd called at 4 o'clock, if they confronted their fears at 4 o'clock, turned on all the lights in the house, and found the 4 innocent victims, and maybe some of them could have been saved if they called 911. But that's like in a book or a movie. This is the real life situation of how people react under extreme stress. Denial is one of the, you know, responses you get from extreme stress, from situations like this. So I don't see that it's a real problem at all for the prosecution whatsoever.
You know, Mike, I was at a homicide one time, and this woman and her boyfriend were targeted by these guys that then they went in the elevator. They sensed there was something wrong at this party, and the couple left, and they went in the elevator, and the perps ran down the stairs and stopped the elevator before the elevator could reach the next floor, and they murdered the man right in front of his girlfriend. When we got there, he was laying on the floor of the landing of like the 8th or 9th floor of this building. And he was dead as dead could be. And she kept saying, "Oh, he's strong, he'll recover." And she was in total denial that he was dead. And I almost didn't believe that she thought that, but she really did think that he was going to recover and he was going to get better. So seeing that, and seeing hundreds of murder victims in my life, and seeing hundreds of alive victims that had to deal with something like this, her behavior was inexplicable. You wouldn't believe it unless you saw it.
Right.
Anyone would see that he was dead and he was never coming back. But she, in order to cope, had to tell herself that, no, he's going to be okay. He's going to get up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I think Bethany Mortensen and, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, I think that's what they were dealing with in their brain. They were terrified. They were terrified, and they were in shock, and they were drunk. I believe, they were drunk. So combine all of those things, and the unexplainable and inexplicable can be explained. Maybe you don't accept it. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to. But if you've been to murder scenes, if you're a rescue worker, you've seen things like this. And you can't deny that these things can absolutely 100% happen, Mike.
Yeah, I remember this story, a very close friend of mine in the 4-6 precinct. I was talking to him on a Friday, and I said, we're just talking. I said, I'll see you on Monday. I'll see you Monday morning. And the weekend came. He passed away that weekend. And when I went back to work that following Monday morning, they told me he'd passed away. And I was like, but I had to talk to him. My first reaction wasn't like, oh my God, that's so terrible. My first reaction was, but I have to talk to him. It was like a weird thing. And here I was a police officer. We react very differently to stress. And sometimes the first thing is denial. Like if you are diagnosed with a rare disease, you might say, oh, no, I'm going to beat it. I'm going to beat it. No, I'm going to beat it. And then you might not. You may or you may not. But the first defensive thing, it tends to be denial. And there's nothing wrong with that. We're human beings. All of us are wired the same exact way. We have it as law enforcement. If you're a nurse, a doctor, an emergency room, you're a paramedic, you're a fireman, you're a police officer, you're wired the same way, but we dull down our senses because we see a lot of death and pain and suffering. But for most people that don't see that level of violence and the death that we see, they're still wired the normal way and they're not affected by that. So therefore, they're reacting like 99% of the population would react, like denial. And these are young people. These aren't 40-year-olds. These are 20-year-olds.
Absolutely. Let's go back to the ABC report here. This is the defense for Kohberger.
The defense is making the argument that this is hearsay, an out-of-court statement said for the truth of the matter asserted. But the prosecution is arguing the text messages, the phone calls. It's not meant to prove the contents of those messages, but to show a timeline, to show how people were reacting and how this murder occurred throughout the time frame that they're arguing.
Kohberger had been working on his PhD in criminology at Washington State University, about 8 miles across state lines from the University of Idaho, where Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan were just starting their futures.
They were all friends and had shared a life together in college and were looking forward to going on and hopefully doing great things, whether it was together or apart. And all of that came to a sudden halt.
The horrific scene unfolding the night of November 12th, 2022. Kaylee and Maddie, newly 21 and lifelong best friends, went to a popular campus bar around 10 p.m. They're later seen at the grub truck, laughing and ordering food. And this video appears to be the last time they were seen alive before turning in for the night. Authorities say their roommate, Xana, and her boyfriend, Ethan, both 20, were at a fraternity party earlier that same night, arriving home around 1:45 a.m. There's 3 stories to the house. Kaylee and Maddie were together in Maddie's room on the 3rd floor. Kaylee's dog Murphy was alone in Kaylee's bedroom just down the hall. Ethan was staying over that night in Xana's room, which was on the 2nd floor. One of the other roommates in the house also on the 2nd floor, and one in a bedroom on the 1st floor.
Everything was so normal in that home on King Road. Nobody could have imagined it was about to become a house of horror.
Police responding to a 911 call just before noon, hours after law enforcement say the murders happened.
When the lead sergeant goes into the house, he later told people how the high smell of blood rose up in his nostrils, and it took him back.
This is a brutal crime scene. These victims were not shot. They were stabbed to death.
What was baffling to police, they say, is that it didn't appear that there was any forced entry. It doesn't appear that any of the victims had been sexually assaulted.
And weeks later, Kohberger was arrested at his parents' home in Pennsylvania.
Last night, detectives arrested 28-year-old Brian Christopher Kohberger.
Since his arrest, prosecutors have maintained that surveillance footage, cell phone records, and DNA evidence link Kohberger to the murders. And the linchpin is Kohberger's DNA.
We're not just talking about his DNA happened to be found in, a dresser drawer or something. It was found on a knife sheath where 4 people were killed by a knife. This is as crime scene as it gets.
But Kohberger's attorneys have tried to have that crucial DNA evidence dismissed, claiming it was unlawfully obtained using public genealogy websites.
If you can upload one of these profiles for $12 and find out all kinds of information, how is that not a Fourth Amendment issue? That was done twice without a warrant. in this case.
Koberger's attorneys also argued that authorities violated the law when they used a garbage collector to retrieve trash from the Koberger family home. It's in a gated neighborhood in Pennsylvania. And according to his lawyers, they did it without a warrant. The FBI allegedly using the garbage to make that DNA match.
I think it is different when you have the FBI telling the trash man what to do.
But prosecutors have argued all facets of the investigation, including the DNA and the use of public genealogy databases, were done properly.
The individuals who are utilizing these databases, and we're talking about millions of them, are willingly sharing their information with each other. The issue is that no one sharing this information with millions of other people could have a reasonable expectation of privacy.
And the judge siding with the state, allowing the DNA evidence to be presented to the jury. Koberger's jury trial is slated to begin in August, and the two surviving roommates are expected to testify. His defense team attempting to strike down the death penalty on the basis of his autism spectrum disorder. For the family and the loved ones of the victims, the years-long nightmare continues as they just hold on to their memories.
Kaylee is like the definition of sunshine.
To know Kaylee was to love Kaylee.
Kaylee and Maddie had been best friends since 6th grade.
They did absolutely everything together. First dates, first boyfriends, graduated high school. They had their first heartbreaks together. Kaylee was 12, 13 years old. They're blasting Taylor Swift in the basement, comforting each other.
If I had one or two words to describe Maddie Mae, it would be just an angel. She just made me proud.
Xana was in the same sorority as Maddie. She was dating Ethan, a freshman, and also a triplet.
My first impression of Ethan was he's just this huge dude that you wouldn't really approach, but as soon as you really got to know him, you realize that he's like one big teddy bear.
This case has been so fraught for so long now, for this small community and for a nation that has watched getting whoever was responsible for these killings, getting them brought to justice in whatever way the jury decides. That's what we're going to start to see this coming August.
Wow. When you see the kids and you see the emotion behind this, and again, that has nothing to do with prosecuting this case, but from a human perspective, when you see these kids and you see their families and you hear their families speaking about them, it really, to me, it hits home, and I think you would not be human if it didn't hit home when you hear the families talk about their kids. The big thing, and it happened very recently, and Mike and I did cover it, was that Ann Taylor, who is the lead attorney for Brian Koberger, she tried to get the DNA evidence thrown out, saying that he had an expectation of privacy, and also the way that the DNA was identified through genealogy sites, public genealogy sites, and that the FBI had basically, her argument was the FBI handled it incorrectly, the search was done incorrectly, and using these genealogy sites that some clearly don't allow law enforcement to use them. But that's not a violation of the law. It's a violation of their terms of service, which is a lot lesser standard than the law. So Judge Stephen Hippler, who is the judge of record right now, he ruled on the side of the prosecution on all of these issues. Therefore, the DNA will go forward. The DNA will be allowed to be used as evidence. Mike.
Yeah, that's a good ruling by Hippler because, Brian Koberger has no right to privacy in the crime scene that he created, and so if his DNA is found there, that's his problem, like a fingerprint, whatever, footprint, doesn't matter. It's found there. The police, the only thing that mattered was that the police got a valid search warrant for that extensive search of the premises at 1122 Kings Road. Once they got that, that's it. So whatever they find, that can be used against them. That's incriminating, absolutely. So therefore, Hippler did a great job and cut through all the stuff. Look, Ann Taylor is doing the best she can. She's throwing everything out there. She's making great arguments. Some of them may be some specious, but very imaginative, but she's doing the best she can for a client. she's zealously advocating for Kohlberger. That's her job. And so therefore she's doing her job there. So therefore, that all that evidence is coming in, that really hurts to the defense. In this case here, we have the 9/11 call that will come in because that's not hearsay. It's being offered just to show state of mind and the time frame in which people began to understand that a horrific crime was committed. And so therefore, that's all spontaneous. It's present sense impression, and therefore it's going to come in. Again, I understand why she's doing what she's doing. That's her job, but no one has to worry about this being excluded by Hitler. In every kind of case like this, you get a homicide case or a rape case, a real serious case. The 911 call, the defense is always trying to knock it out. And in this case, it's not going to be successful. It always comes in. I would imagine Judge Hitler is going to allow the 911 call to come in.
Absolutely. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, ring that bell, hit the like button, share us with your friends and family. If you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels, and you can become a member of the Police Off the Cuff family just by joining on our YouTube. So this is, one of the things about the DNA is that there is really no case law that Ann Taylor can hang her hat on to make her arguments to throw out the DNA. So her arguments were really weak because she couldn't cite a case. And when attorneys argue the law, usually they will cite a case. She didn't have a single case that she could cite. So the judge was like, well, where's the precedent for this? Mike.
Yeah, if you're going to make an argument to a judge about excluding evidence and conversely wanting to get evidence in to help your client, you want to stretch what is generally acceptable, you have to have some sort of foundational case, some sort of precedent, P-R-E-C-E-D-E-N-T, not precedent, in order to say, look, it's been done in the past, other courts have accepted it, or, you, Your Honor, in a previous case from a couple of years ago, you accepted it, or in a different, if you wanted to exclude it, say, Your Honor, you excluded that, or someone else excluded that. The Supreme Court a couple of years ago did this, or they ruled that way. You're trying to show that you have a foundation upon which your argument is built. And so therefore she didn't have that, because what she's asking for is stretching the idea of privacy and trying to basically really stymie the police in trying to do an investigation, claiming they would need multiple search warrants every time they handled a piece of evidence in a different way. It was so far beyond what's acceptable. She would absolutely have to have a really strong precedent. There is none whatsoever. And so the judge rightly ruled. He even said it to her, can you cite something? She couldn't.
Absolutely. This is from Fox News Channel.
Authorities released the audio of the 911 call made after the 2022 quadruple murders at the University of Idaho. It comes as the suspect's lawyers hope to take capital punishment off the table in this terrible crime. Madison Scarpino is live with more. Madison.
John, we are now hearing some of the terrifying moments after 4 students were brutally stabbed to death. This call was placed just before noon, several hours after the murder. A warning, some may find this disturbing, but here's how the 911 call starts.
911 location of your emergency. Something is happening. Something happened in our house. We don't know what. What is the address of the emergency? 1122.
The phone was passed around to several people during the frantic call. You can hear cries and screams in the background at times, and the operator asked the callers what's going on.
One of the roommates has passed out, and she was drunk last night, and she's not waking up.
Okay.
Oh, and they saw some man in their house last night. Yeah.
The operator tells the distraught callers law enforcement and an ambulance are on the way. The call ends once officers arrive at the off-campus house, and that's when they find Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogan, Kaylee Goncalves, and Ethan Chapin dead in their bedrooms. Prosecutors say 28-year-old criminology PhD student Brian Kohberger killed the young victims. He was allegedly identified through DNA from a knife sheath left at the scene, but Kohberger's attorneys are now saying prosecutors did not disclose evidence on time. And because of this, the defense is asking the judge to take the death penalty off the table for Kohberger. His trial is set to start this August, and it will likely last several weeks. John.
Madison Scarpino. Madison, thanks. Let's bring in Nima Rahmani, a former federal prosecutor and president of West Coast Trial Lawyers. So the defense, Kohberger's defense team, is asking that that the death penalty be taken off the table based on what you know of their filings. What do you think the chances are?
John, I think the chances are slim, but this is what death penalty lawyers try to do. They try to save their client's life. And we recently saw in another very high-profile Idaho murder case where Lori Vallow, the doomsday cult mom, the death penalty was removed in that case because the prosecution didn't turn over evidence. So what the defense in the Kohberger case is trying to do is file every motion. They're taking a kitchen sink approach because they're not just looking at the trial court and the jurors. They're looking at the mandatory state and federal appeals that follow every death penalty case because their singular goal is to keep Brian Kohberger off death row.
You think they're grasping at straws here, or they have a case?
I do believe they're grasping at straws. You know, there is the single source DNA that puts Kohberger at the scene. His cell phone appears to travel from Washington State, where he lived, to Idaho, where the murders happened. And of course, the white Hyundai Elantra that really broke this case. So there's a lot of evidence here that points to Brian Kohberger. And what the defense is trying to do is, again, take that kitchen sink approach, throw everything out there. Maybe an appellate judge down the road will say, you know what, the trial judge made a mistake, and for that reason, we're going to spare Kohberger's life.
You know, when this case first broke, it was more than a month, I think, that before any arrests were made. And people, especially in Idaho, in that community, were saying, what's going on? How come police haven't made an arrest? This is, you know, this is.
I'd just like to comment on that. That was ridiculous. That was absolutely ridiculous. And that was the media.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, a month's gone by. Why is there no arrest? I mean, anyone that's worked homicide or major cases, you know, a month for a complicated case like this, and they wound up making an arrest 6 weeks later. That was the media pouring gasoline on a fire. There was even some in the media saying, is this now a cold case? Can they bring the FBI in to take over this case? All kinds of nonsense like that. So that was what we were hearing. And, you know, anyone that knows homicide investigation knows that it's complicated. And not every case is solved the first 48, like everyone is taught on television. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, it would be wonderful if we could solve homicides like they do on Law and Order, you know, within 45 minutes, or that TV show, the first 48 hours. You know, you can, depending on the circumstance of the case, but there are times when, if you do actually watch that show a lot, and I do actually love it, that they don't solve it. They gather a lot of evidence within 48 hours, but they don't always solve homicides in 48 hours. Some take years. You try to track down witnesses that disappear. You know, so there's a lot of 6 weeks to get, examination done on toxicology and blood toxicology. So therefore, there's a whole heck of a lot of time these things take, especially also if you're working across organizational lines. You got a local police department, you have the state of Idaho troopers, but you also have the FBI. So they're all going to have time to take their time in order to analyze the evidence properly. You want them to take their time. You want them to get it right. You don't want a screw up. Yeah. The idea that, oh, it's a cold case squad, a cold case, what the heck's going on? What's wrong with Chief Fry? and the Moscow Police Department. You know what? Those guys did a great job. And the only reason why they were calling for, some sort of saying this is a cold case, declaring this a cold case, is because the news media wasn't getting fed their daily briefings that they like, so they could show them on TV every night. So therefore, they're the ones who were actually saying, I don't think the people in Idaho were saying this is a cold case, but the news media is trying to make it out like it's a cold case. And that's a problem with our 24/7 news media.
100%. Walter Sobchak, I hope I said your name correctly, from the chat. For the last 10 years, you can have someone on camera clearly committing a crime and the internet explodes saying this person did nothing wrong. Well, they shouldn't be charged because of their upbringing. Walter, you're 100% right.
Yeah.
I see it all the time. I hate even to mention it because it's such a divisive case for many, not for me. Luigi Mangione, there's people saying he's innocent because his face wasn't caught on camera as he was shooting Brian Thompson. And again, he's innocent to proven guilty, but there is tons of evidence against Luigi Mangione. And there are those that follow this show and other shows that say, what evidence do they have? The cops planted the gun. Yeah, they planted a gun that matched the ballistics on the scene of the shooting. How did they do that? That's magic, So the stupidity out there is unbelievable. And we deal with it every single day when we put out a show. And I try to be respectable, but some people are just do not get it whatsoever. Let me go back to the report by Fox here.
Bungled police work. But it turns out they were, they had their eye on Kohberger all this time and were sort of, trying to do everything they could to make sure that they had an ironclad case against him. It would seem pretty tough for the defense to pick that case apart now.
It is very tough. And like you said, John, it did take approximately a month, and one of the most gruesome murders in Idaho state history. And as a former prosecutor, you would expect there to be a lot more evidence linking the crime scene to Kohberger, but he is one of the most careful criminal defendants I've ever covered in my more than 2 decades of doing this. He is a criminology PhD student. He would wear gloves everywhere he went. He would discard his trash in plastic bags and other folks' trash. And it was only through his father's DNA that they were able to do an IgG analysis and link that DNA on the knife sheath back to Kohberger.
I remember the 2 traffic stops that state police made as he was on his way back to Pennsylvania from where he was living in Idaho. Do you see any, the fact that the state police knew he was a suspect and pulled him over? Do you see any problems there?
No, police can pull folks over. They can ask questions. And you're right. Brian Kohberger was pulled over with his father as they were traveling from Washington to Pennsylvania. So they had their eyes on him because his cell phone had pinged at or near the home where the murders happened. Not on the night of the murder, because again, he was so savvy and sophisticated, he either turned his phone off or he put it in airplane mode before he got there. So they were eyeing Brian Kohberger for weeks. And fortunately, they were able to get some discarded food that his father had thrown out. And when that happens, there's no Fourth Amendment protection, and that's how they were able to close the loop on this.
So very, very, very interesting. From the chat, Cindy Hollenbeck, thank you so much for the $5 super sticker. MPD did a Colombo feigned ignorance. They kicked butt. Yeah, Moscow Police Department. I had my doubts about them early on in the investigation too because of their homicide inexperience. But they had help from the Idaho State Police and they had help from the FBI. So everything came together and they did a fantastic job. There are some that would like to disparage them. And early on, I didn't think they were up to it. And when they made an arrest 6 weeks later, I was duly impressed like everyone else. Mike?
Yeah, Bill, small town like Moscow, Idaho, they might only have maybe 2 or 3 homicides a year, something very, very few. And so therefore they don't have the experience. And, you know, and as you've said many times, you don't get a second chance at a crime scene. So if you get an inexperienced detective, inexperienced police officers, they could actually, ruin some of the evidence that you could have gathered at a crime scene, and through ignorance and inexperience. They were great. Chief Fry was excellent. I complimented him by saying I would never, ever want to play poker against that man because he was fantastic. He kept a straight face. He didn't give anything out. He kept his cards close to his vest. And within just a few hours, they had the state police there. Within 24 hours, I think the FBI was there. They did it right, and they got it right. And because of all the things that they did right, they got a tremendous amount of evidence against Brian Kohlberger. And we can be thankful for that.
100%. This is News Nation, Ashley Banfield, and she has Steve Goncalves on, the father of Kaylee Goncalves, one of the victims.
I'm joined now by Steve Goncalves. He lost his daughter, Kaylee, that tragic morning. Steve, I know that mercifully that the authorities gave you that tape before the rest of us. You've had some time. But beyond that, I don't know how, after 2.5 years of gag order, this landed with you. I don't know if this was more painful, more elucidating, a bitter pill. Tell me how you're coping with this at this point.
I'm a father, so it's not, my emotions are really my children and my wife. So I would say that they feel like they're slowly drowning, and I'm the guy that's trying to help them stay from drowning. And these slow leaks, this torturous process that we're going through, they've done a better job. They've responded to our feedback. We have said, hey, the 911 call is not something that we want to turn on TV and actually see. So they have responded. They have done a better job of, this is a community that doesn't know what murder is. They don't have any clue how to handle, public relations. It just doesn't really exist. So we're getting through it together, and it's hard to say it's getting better, but they are communicating, and we're trying to protect our children and protect all the families and protect the survivors to make sure that we don't have these trolls that are attacking them for no reason.
Did you get any clarity? Did you learn anything or any epiphanies when you listened to the call?
Yes. I mean, I always wanted it to make more sense. Like any murder, your brain wants to gravitate towards make this make sense. But the truth is, murder never makes sense. This is a psychopathic person who does something that breaks the norm of all of our consciousness. All of our minds are just struggling with the fact that this has happened. So we can logically try to make it make sense, but it's not really going to make sense. It's not Hollywood, where they try to make it all fit together. In real life, you're just sitting there dumbfounded, like, why can somebody be killed in their bedroom?
I have nothing but respect for this man.
Yes.
And what he has gone through in the last 2.5 years, and how much he's actually changed and even grown, I would say. He's grown a lot in the way that I think he just knows that there's he and his wife there. The pain on his face, the pain on his wife's face, the pain from their body language, losing their daughter in this horrific way. And they had to deal with not just the police and the prosecutors not giving them any information, but they had to deal with the press and the social media and the public. And just the man, I think he's an amazing man. And at first, when this occurred, he was what every dad in this country would be. He was angry. He was really angry. And he acted angry all the time. Somehow, over 2 years, 2.5 years, he has a certain calmness to his speech now. He has a certain calmness. And I think the reason for that is because he's trying to be strong for his wife and for his family. And at some point, and maybe he's already had that epiphany, at some point, he's going to hit the wall himself, you know? And I hope before or when that happens, he gets help. And I think there's signs in his speech, in his how he's talking, that he has already received some help. And I really applaud that. Mike.
Yeah, as you said in the beginning, he was every man's dad. You know, you just want to destroy whoever killed your child, and every parent, mother or father, or sibling, that's the way you feel. That's absolutely 100% normal. He was really angry, and part of it, as you said, had to do with the fact that he wasn't getting a lot of information, and he was besieged by all kinds of people wanting to interview him, and he didn't have anything that he could solidly say, and he had to be strong for his family. Now, after 2 years, he's able to, gather his thoughts, control that, and now the anger is aside, and now he's there, strength for his family, and his wife, the same thing, because they have to take care of everyone else in their family. So therefore, they're in it now. It's a grudge match against Kohberger. They're in it for the long haul. They know that this is going to take a lot more, a number of more, like 6 more months by the time we even get to the trial. So they're prepared for it. They are hunkering down emotionally, and they're ready, and they're going to continue to go on. They're just, hell with everything. We're going to see this through to the bitter end. We're just going to grit our teeth and do it. And you're right. When this is all over, like maybe a year from now, it'll be time for he and his wife to just get away. And that's going to be tough for them, because what they'll have gone through by the time that stage happens, that stage of grief happens. But they're a strong family, very strong family.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Mike, unfortunately, even though the trial is supposed to take place this August,
right,
even if Kohberger gets convicted,
mm-hmm.
it's not over. Then it's going to be years and years and years of appeals,
mm-hmm.
because we all know no one gets the death penalty, 6 months from the end of the trial, a year. It takes years, 10, 15, 20 years. So it's not going to be over anytime soon. So this is a lifetime that Steve Goncalves has have to deal with this and be strong for his family. And I really feel sorry for the man. Let me go back to News Nation.
How does that make sense?
You mentioned in a statement today that you think Hunter Johnson protected those girls. I mean, listen, I don't know what happened, but I'm trying to piece this together like a puzzle, and it sure feels like he knew something and he protected Bethany from knowing. Do you think that he went up to the 3rd floor and may have seen what happened to Kaylee and Maddie, and therefore said, get out, get out, get out, but did not tell Bethany and did not tell Dylan?
I talked to Hunter directly, and it sucks. He had a broken soul. This is a man who's seen his best friend dead, like dying, like gone. So we exchanged a moment, and I talked to him, and he was trying to protect everyone in that house to not go through what was overwhelming him at the moment. So I don't know about the details of upstairs, downstairs, door open, door not. But in the bigger picture, does it really matter? He was literally just responding to what he probably thought was a prank, thinking his friend, his best buddy, had these girls rolling. And he showed up there, and he seen the opposite of a prank. And I seen it in his eyes. He was broken. He was very broken from what he had seen.
Well, did Hunter tell you that he was able to open the door to Xana's room and witness Xana and Ethan in there?
He told me that went to the door and he was trying to go through that door and he was trying to figure out what was going on in there. It's kind of like what you're hearing with that audio. He announced himself. He said, "Hey, I'm here. What's going on?" But they didn't respond. And he went in there, he seen something. And I think around 2:15, you hear when somebody truly sees something.
Thanks for watching. Go to join.
You know, one of the things that many people may not realize is that there's not just 4 victims here. You multiply that by all of the victims' family members. You multiply that by all of the victims' friends. You multiply that by the town of Moscow, Idaho. You multiply that by the University of Idaho. And you come up with thousands of victims to this horrific tragedy. And I think that, you know, even when we report on true crime, and I sometimes still feel it. I feel like the way I felt when I was Sergeant Cannon, Manhattan North Homicide Squad Sergeant. And when I walked out of a crime scene, or when I dealt with a family member who was so distraught, or I had to go to someone's house and tell them that a loved one was dead. Then I'm back at being Sergeant Cannon, Manhattan North Homicide Squad, not Sergeant Cannon, Police Off the Cuff / Real Crime Stories podcast. And there's a big difference, Mike.
Yeah, some of the hardest jobs we've done, and it's not, chasing somebody and arresting them. Part of it is, and one of the hardest things I've done is, how do you tell someone that a loved one has been murdered? I have children of my own. I'm married. I've got brothers and sisters. We all do. And how would you explain to someone, because you want to do it with the respect and the professionalism that you'd want someone to tell you if someone in your family was a crime victim, and here you're doing it. It's very stressful to try to tell someone tactfully, knowing they're going to break down and cry, knowing they're going to ask you questions that A, you don't know the answer to, or B, you can't answer because of an ongoing investigation. Very difficult dealing with this sort of thing. And that takes a lot out of you. Sometimes you just get home from work and you just bang your head against the wall because it really messes with you. And that is part of the stress that you have to deal with. And so I'm listening to Ms. Goncalves there, and he's talking about his daughter and he's talking about his family. And you could see that he's been through the ringer, and we still have so much more to go. But it is very tough, and it is very wearing. And anyone who, especially if you've done this numerous times as a first responder, that's one of the toughest parts of the job, is dealing with the family.
Yeah, let me go back to another report from News Nation.
Evolves throughout the call from what you can feel they're thinking in the beginning, versus it almost feels like there's this moment where they discover that something really, really bad has happened midway through the call. And then actually I was just thinking about how we know so much about the case now. When you listen to it knowing all of the facts and everything that's come out, but you just sort of put yourself in their shoes in that moment, just waking up, knowing nothing after a night of partying, and just the pure horror that must have been like for these young college kids.
And we do have to put our hats on for being them at that moment, not hindsight. There's so much we know now, but they knew nothing at that point. And this next bit, I think, highlights how little they knew, Brian, because at first, a neighbor gets on the phone and says one roommate is drunk and passed out. Let me read the transcript. The dispatcher says, "Tell me what's exactly going on." Female neighbor says, one of the roommates who's passed out and she was drunk last night and she's not waking up. Oh, and they saw some man in their house last night. It's very, she's very matter of fact, and she definitely doesn't sound terrified. They have not seen anything. Like, with that kind of a tone of voice, even though Dylan is seemingly very upset at the beginning, that's not somebody who knows there's a bloodbath upstairs.
Right. And remember, based on the witnesses who we spoke to after this happened, all of these kids were out in the front driveway and out towards the road. It seems like when they were on the phone for part of the 911 call. I think that's why the neighbor at one point from the house to the right took the phone. But you made an interesting point when she says, saw a man in the house around 4 a.m. It's almost like she's less concerned about that at that moment, which kind of goes back to the text messages and all the questions about, well, why didn't they call 911 then? I mean, perhaps they really did just think this was some kind of prank. You know, it was a party house. And when she says saw a man in the house around 4 a.m., she doesn't sound that concerned about it. She seemed more worried that someone's passed out and not responding, not as worried like, hey, there was an intruder in the middle of the night.
Or maybe that intruder, by the way, if we have non-responsive housemates, maybe that intruder brought something last night, gave it to them, and that's why they're not responding. Maybe they've OD'd. It really feels to me like that's the level of their fear and concern, not there was a homicidal maniac in the home last night. Because, I mean, that would be very upsetting if you're a housemate whose other housemate is unable to answer her door and is out cold. Okay, the other issue, and this is the first time I'd seen this, I had to listen to it a lot of times. At one point, it sounds like they are repeatedly calling at the door, at Xana's door. Xana, Ethan, knock, knock, knock. It really does sound like they're trying to rouse her, but that they can't get past that door. That door is closed.
Yeah, and it's unclear. You're trying to sort of visualize where everybody is in the house and what's actually happening during the call. And we don't really know, but you're right. They do call out for Xana and Ethan. They appear to be looking for them. And again, you can kind of hear they're panicked in the beginning, but it seems to become more panicked as the call goes on. And there's that one point where it's just like that heavy breathing. It's almost like a panic attack at that point. That's kind of what I thought of.
Okay, there's one point where a male gets on the phone, and we think that's now a fraternity brother of Ethan's named Hunter Johnson. And that male on the phone sounds like he may know something is up. And I'll say that because it sounds like it might be his voice saying, Xana, Ethan, and can't get past that door. But it's possible he may have gone to the third floor because there's a long break in between the Xana, Ethan, no response, then a panicked response from Dylan and a get out, get out, get out. Let me read the transcript. So the male says, Xana, Ethan, and 6 seconds pass. Dylan says, she's passed out. What's wrong? Knock, knock, knock. She's not waking up. Male says, Xana.
Thanks for watching. Go to.
So horrible to hear this stuff. You know, it just, we've just been apprised of this. It's been over 2 years. And we're just hearing these 911 calls. And think about the family members of the 4 victims. Just outrageous. Mike, your final thoughts tonight.
I think that for everybody who's listening, that they don't have to worry about the introduction of the 911 tape to the jurors. It's going to come in because it is very valuable because it is the spontaneous utterances of people calling for help, realizing that something horrific has happened to their friends, and they're trying to deal with it, and mentioning that there was, oh, by the way, there was a guy here around 4 o'clock in the morning. That helps the prosecution so much. And so therefore, you know, the Judge Hippler is I'm 99.9% sure he's going to allow this in. These kinds of things always happen. 911 calls always come in as evidence. So I think anybody who still thinks that, you know, a Colombian drug cartel killed all those kids, or there was 6 homicidal maniacs all in that room all in that place trying to kill all these young kids. No, it comes down to one person only, and everything points to a solitary 6 foot tall, slim, tall build with bushy eyebrows, who walked through that house that night and was seen by Dylan Mortensen. It all fits, and I think people should have faith in the prosecution of this case.
Well said, Mike. You know, I just wanted to say something. We also, in these big cases like this, we all want justice. And we all want law enforcement and the criminal justice system to have the right person. And then we want the justice to be swift, fair, and if the person is guilty, harsh. And that's why this is a death penalty case. So I just hope and pray that the prosecution in this case does everything correctly, which is impossible. Everyone makes mistakes, but does enough things correct that they can prove Brian Koberger guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. If he in fact is guilty. Again, he's innocent till proven guilty. But that's what the defense is doing right now. They're trying to poke holes to create doubt. On the way, try to get evidence suppressed, try to do the best job they can in representing him as his advocates. Folks, I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. Saw a lot of new names and faces in the chat. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, hit the like button, share us with your friends and your family. And Mike, thank you for being my co-host tonight. Have a great night, everyone. From Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. God bless. We'll see you next time.
One episode just ain't enough.